This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
Nicolette Rubinsztein gives career moms the practical tools to approach their work and life through the lens of strategy and business decision-making, rather than emotion and guilt. Learn why flexibility is nirvana for career moms, how to get a part-time position, getting on the same page as your partner, curating your childcare jigsaw, the importance of outsourcing, and how to have a good relationship with your boss. Valeria Teles interviews Nicolette, the author of Not Guilty. Nicolette is a non-executive director in the wealth management industry, with board positions in a number of leading companies including UniSuper, Zurich Australia Limited, Class Limited, CBHS Health Fund, and Super Ed. She was president of the Actuaries Institute in 2019 and was previously a director of ASFA for 8 years. Prior to her board career, Nicolette held 3 general manager roles at CBA/Colonial First State, spanning 14 years, as well as senior positions at BT Funds Management and Towers Perrin prior to that. Nicolette is a qualified actuary, holds an executive MBA from the AGSM, and is a graduate of AICD. Meet Nicolette at NicoletteRubinsztein.com. Here is the interview with Nicolette Rubinsztein.
In your own words, who is Nicolette Rubinstein?
Great question. Well, I am a passionate advocate for women and career flexibility. I'm also passionate about climate change and nature, the ocean. So I was raised actually in the northeast of England, Yorkshire, lived 10 years in South Africa and have spent, the last 25 years in Australia. So the other thing is I very much consider myself a global citizen. If you ask me what nationality I am, I can't really answer that question.
Right. Wow. That sounds wonderful to me. Those experiences of knowing what is to be different environments. Yeah, that leads us to, I would say, acceptance and tolerance. So I have these warm-up questions here before we begin to talk about some of the topics in your book, Not Guilty. The first one for you had to be this one. What does it mean to be a mother?
I think that being a mother has been the best experience of my life, actually. It is the thing that I treasure the most. I absolutely love being a mother, and I consider it my, number one role in life and in many ways purpose in life.
And one of the topics in your book that caught my attention is that when you connected this being a mother with the emotional state we call guilt, for some reason surprised me that mothers, they feel guilty in so many ways. Would you like to talk to me for a moment about why is that?
Yes. Where does that guilt come from? I think it comes from trying to do the two roles, the role of career and the role of mother. And sometimes you feel that you're not doing either well. My personal view is that you end up often giving more on the work front, and it's often the children that suffer. So in some ways, I've felt more guilt personally in my career on the personal side than I have, towards not spending enough time with my children than I have towards not giving enough at work. It's quite interesting how that those priorities often play out.
Dynamics. I will be exploring this topic a little bit more in a moment. Before that, let me ask you some other basic or open questions. The happiness. What is happiness to you, Nicolette?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I've actually been reading a lot on happiness, and I feel like my views on happiness have changed quite significantly. I think, and just in the last sort of 10, 15 years as I've got older, I feel like I went on to, the kind of standard recipe of happiness as you leave school, go to university or study, get a job, and you go on this sort of mouse wheel of, getting promoted, buying a house, very, very materialistic and superficial. And I think it was my mid-30s before I realized that possibly wasn't the recipe for happiness.
Right.
And, I do believe that, I think I'm very influenced by that Harvard longitudinal study on happiness, that there's a great TED talk by Robert Waldinger on it, which is really that happiness is about relationships, and that we get so much of our happiness from relationships. And I think that brings us, back to your children, your partner, your friends, and you've got to treasure those things. And to the extent as a career mum that we end up spending endless hours at work and not spending time with our family and our friends, that, it does detract from that happiness.
That is something to reflect upon. I noticed that you also mentioned in your book something interesting that relates to living life with purpose or with deeper understanding. And you mentioned this author, I think her name is Brownie Aware.
Brene Brown.
Yes.
Brown. Yes.
Not Brene Brown, another one that wrote a book about the top regrets of the dying.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Brownie Aware, I think her name is. But you mentioned that in your book, and that kind of leads back to this idea of what happiness is and what is important in life, that we often forget about it or are misled most of the time, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, because she does, she talks to people about what their regrets are. And, it is the one that we've been told of so much. No one regrets that they didn't spend more time at work or
Right.
That sort of thing. So, it is very good to tune into that, to, fast forward to your eulogy or, what you might think about your life looking back on it. And, that's the other thing, that sometimes we get frustrated when our children are young. It can seem like hard work, but, you look at older people and they often look back at those years as the happiest years of their life. And it's such a good reminder to really treasure those moments.
Going back to that top 5 regrets of the dying, I love reflecting on the end. I think that's what she was trying to do with her work too. Begin with the end, and then we can understand what life might be about, or if there is such a thing as a grand purpose for this human experience. And speaking of that, I'll ask you the question, what do you think is the purpose of the human experience?
I think that's quite a profound question, but I think we each have our own personal purpose. And, for me, mine is around feminine strength and kindness. I think that's what I would label it. The purpose of the human experience, I think I'm still figuring out, to be honest. But, I think, if we live our life with kindness, that will, that's going to be a good way, regardless of if there's a God, if there's not a God, if we're all in some virtual reality experience. And it's interesting, just coming back to my perspective on this, I've spent a lot of my career in strategy. So, I do like to think about strategy as it applies to your life. And, it comes to your question around, purpose. But you've got to start with if you're an organization, you start with what your purpose is, and you sit down and you work out what your priorities are for the year, and your strategy and how you're going to compete. And I do like to apply the same principles in my own life, actually. And I sit down every year and I think these things through, and think about what the year is about and what I want to focus on. I like the line of your question.
The follow-up question on purpose is, how do we know when we have found our purpose, our unique gifts?
I think that is a feeling inside, actually. I think we've all had jobs or roles in life where we feel stressed and we're not happy, or, even if it's just a small feeling of, not being happy doing it, or it being a chore. And I think, when you start to find your purpose, that, you kind of relax into life, and you enjoy what you're doing every moment of the day. So I think it's a feeling, actually.
Yeah, it's a feeling of also inner peace. I guess I connect that idea, that concept of inner peace and joy. And then as a sign that we are on the right path.
Yeah, well, that's what I think we're all aiming for, that feeling of inner peace. And just to give you a tangible example with that, so I actually had executive roles, quite senior roles for a long time, and which involved managing people. And I enjoyed a lot of it, but I look back and I realized I actually found it quite stressful as well. And I think about that because I think I cared a lot about the individuals, and, each issue that would arise each day, I felt, was sort of struck me hard, effectively. And then more recently, about 5 years ago, I left the big organization and I started a career as a non-executive director. And I feel like it's just so much more aligned to my skill set and, where I feel comfortable. It doesn't involve managing people, and it sort of plays to my skills around strategy and my finance background, and also plays to my sort of interpersonal and influencing skills, much more so. So, I do feel like that sort of gives you that sense of inner peace and contentment, really.
Yeah, that's another word I love using, contentment, which connects back to satisfaction. It makes us live the moment with, perhaps the word might be gratitude, just being grateful for what we have. I guess a word that we'll be talking about in a moment, exploring more, is balance. So I'll ask you a general question. What is another word for balance?
Another word for balance. Well, you might say it's inner peace, actually, because I think when you've got that balance, you do feel like you've got that feeling inside you. But I'm not sure if there is a great, you think about work-life balance, I think about flexible working. I feel like there's a little bit about having it all, or, having your cake and eating it as well. But, it's a very personal thing. Balance to one person is not the same as balance to another. Balance to one person might be, working 12 hours a day on the thing that they love doing and not doing anything else. So I think we can't be judgmental about it either.
Or create these fixed ideas of what something is. I agree. Another word that I love playing, exploring more, the idea and concept, is freedom. What is the meaning of freedom to you, Nicolette? What is to be free?
The thing that springs to mind most is the freedom to be yourself. And as women, that's been an interesting journey, I think, in the era that we are living in. Because I do think when you are free to be yourself, you do have that sense of inner peace when you're not pretending to be somebody that you're not. And again, to try and sort of give a more specific example, I actually, my first job was at an insurance company in South Africa in 1992. And it was in a sort of very male-dominated environment. I mean, interestingly, great guys. So no, but I think there was only 3 women in the whole department at the time. And, I realized that I automatically took on sort of more male traits than without thinking, by the way, but I subconsciously thought that that's what I needed to do to get ahead. And so what might that have been? That was things like probably being more assertive than I would normally naturally have been. It might have been not showing any kind of compassionate side. So quite subtle, actually. I think of it from a LGBTQI point of view, and, not being able to be yourself in the workplace, maybe keeping things secret in terms of your relationships. So freedom for me is having is that ability to be yourself.
I wonder if this is changing now, if women are feeling more comfortable in being themselves and exposing the feminine side instead of trying to act or behave more like men in order to succeed.
Yeah, I think that is true. Certainly I see it a lot, and I feel it in my own, kind of how I show up in the workplace, that I feel much more free to be myself. And now I'm a company director, and, there's been a big focus on diversity in boardrooms, not just gender diversity, but cultural diversity. And, I've experienced over the last couple of decades that change towards, having more women in management roles and having more women around the board table. I've definitely witnessed how having 2 or more women helps the decision making and helps the women be themselves as well. So that, and that might be acts of compassion. It often is sort of a lower ego approach to decision making. It sort of, can tone down some of the testosterone in the room. So I'm one of the things I'm really excited about actually is women being able to embrace their femininity in the workplace. And I do see that. I see much more sort of what I would call feminine leaders being successful. If you think about the female leaders of 20 years ago, sort of maybe Margaret Thatcher might be a good example, but that they had to compete in a man's world and had sort of in many ways more male characteristics. Whereas, now I look around the world and I mean, maybe Jacinda Ardern, actually, the New Zealand Prime Minister, is a great example of, a woman who's embraced her femininity and, is running the country in that mold.
Yeah. Speaking of what's happening this year, changing the subject really a bit, COVID-19 and working from home, most of us are doing that. What is your vision for the future?
Yeah, I think it's been a bit of a gift to us because it's proved that flexible working and working from home can work. Listen, I see both sides of it. So it is a gift from particularly for men and women who have children and, want to spend more time with them. I also see the business and the work perspective, which is we do need to physically be together at times and quite a lot for many workplaces to function properly. But I think, now we've got the technology and the capability to do this. And, my vision for the future is that many people will be able to spend 1 or 2 days working from home in future. I think once we get back to the sort of new norm, if you like, that's what we will see happen.
You see companies becoming more flexible. So people, especially women, mothers, can work from home. I love that idea, if that is happening already.
Interestingly, the stepped change there has actually been to do with trust. I think when I speak to people, a lot of managers did not trust their employees to be productive working from home. And I think, yes, technology has played a part, and, yes, having processes and things, but the biggest thing has been trust. I think managers now know that their employees are actually happier and as productive, if not more productive, working from home. And as I say, I don't think there's any case for exclusively working from home for most roles. Some jobs can be done exclusively working from home, but to the extent that you're part of a team, you do need to physically be in the workplace, and to get that interaction.
Do you feel that this is something that is actually true? This idea, if we are happier, then we will produce more, we'll become more productive.
Yeah, and it's very different, the situation in the US from the situation in Australia, because we've pretty much got no cases of COVID at the moment. So we've kind of separated ourselves off as an island from the rest of the world. What's happened has instilled that trust in people, and we've kind of got on now as business as usual, and people are returning to work, and sort of that sense of normality is definitely returning.
The new normal, yeah, as you mentioned earlier. What is your idea of spirituality? What is to be spiritual?
So, as I said, I'm probably still figuring it out, but I'm very conscious that my views have changed even in the last 10 years. But the view that I subscribe to the most would be that we are, part of a global or all-pervasive energy source, and so I don't believe in a sort of all-powerful God. Probably the religion that I'm most drawn to would be Buddhism. But I'm also very conscious that there's a lot that we don't understand about the world, and I'm very comfortable in the state of not understanding.
What a beautiful message for all of us. So, how did you become a writer, Nicolette?
That's a very funny question, because I don't consider myself a writer. So, I'm an actuary by background. I'm very much a numbers person, and I actually do not like writing at all.
Oh, wow.
So, the fact that I came to write a book was very much driven by how passionate and strongly I feel about the subject matter, because it's definitely not my natural state, writing. And, I was of the generation where, you set out, you kind of go to school, there's equality, male-female equality, the world's your oyster, equal opportunity, off you go. And that was all great. And I, all worked fantastically. And then I started having children, and I thought, oh my goodness, this does not work. This is hard. Nobody has told me anything about how to do this. That was the motivation for writing the book. And there was a few things that happened in my life that I feel like were actually kind of lucky, that made things work for me. And that's sort of what I really started to write about. And, one of the ones that was a more conscious decision was flexible working, but there was a few other things in my life that lined up that just made it all work. And I thought I had something to communicate in that.
So let's talk about flexible working. I know we hear about work and life balance. That's another way of saying it. Might be, I will ask you the questions, but what is your experience? Talk to me about your own experience with flexible working.
Yeah, so I was 33 when I had my first child. I knew I wanted to work part-time, and I I was doing a general manager of strategy role at Australia's biggest bank, and I work in the wealth management division. And, given that this was now 17 years ago, I, at the time, fully expected to have to give up my general manager role in order to work part-time. So I was very surprised that at the time that my boss, the CEO, agreed to me keeping my general manager role and working part-time. And I did a bit of a different model from the normal in that I came in every day and I worked 7 a.m. till 1 o'clock every day. So the whole idea was to have half a day at work, half a day with my new baby girl. And I, that arrangement worked, mostly for me personally, because that meant that I got to see her and spend quality time with her every day rather than have some days when I didn't much get to see her at all. But interestingly, it also worked from a work point of view as well, because it meant that I was there every day if anything urgent came up. And I didn't get treated as part-time either. People who work part-time will often say they don't get invited to meetings or copied in on emails, that sort of thing. So I didn't get treated as part-time. And I did that arrangement for about 8 years, so quite a long time. And it worked really well. And then I got offered a bigger general manager role involving a large sort of $40 million project that had, at most, it had about 150 people working on the project. And so during that time, that was for about 4 years, and I transitioned into what I called flexible working, where I was working more than 40 hours a week, and I was trying to pick up the kids from school 3 days a week. And then I would catch up on the work in the evenings and on the weekends. And then I, as I said, I left the bank about 5 years ago to start a career as a non-executive director, and I've still been working flexibly. And ironically, this has been the easiest way to work flexibly, because the only days that I have to do a full day would be when I have board meetings, and the other days I can generally do school hours. And you can take on as many or as few directorships to sort of balance that workload. So if I look back and I think about what's worked and what hasn't worked in those sort of 3 different models, the current model works well, and the 7 till 1 worked well. The what I called flexible working with the 40 hours a week, that was the most challenging. And at the time, I was really grateful. It had an awesome job and I was loving it. But I don't think I could have kept that up for longer than the 4 years that I did that for. It was, I felt like I was working 7 days a week because I was working 7 days a week.
Right.
And it was very full on.
Would you say that it takes both, that balance, another kind of balance between what your needs are and the company's needs?
Oh, absolutely. And, one of the insights that I've had, when I first went part-time, there was no such thing as flexible work policies at work. They didn't exist. Now in Australia, more than 70% of sort of medium or larger companies have a flexible work policy. So it's more understood and accepted. But one of my big insights has actually been that it's your relationship with your boss that's the biggest determinant of whether you can structure these flexible work arrangements to suit you. Because, there's some, great companies who have these policies and, might have management support or board support, but your own individual boss can very much make the difference between whether that's going to be an option for you or not. And I think the benefits to the individual are probably quite clear, in terms of being able to spend more time with your family. But I'm also very passionate about what the benefits to the organisation are as well. And even my own case study kind of proves that out, that I ended up staying with the organisation for 14 years. And, so just in terms of retention, and we know the huge amount of business cost associated with turnover of staff, recruitment costs, training costs. So that retention is really important. But the other one is just happier employees. So higher employee engagement scores. And, what we've seen in Australia, interestingly, I've seen this in quite a few companies, that the employee engagement scores have gone up over COVID when people have been working from home. And, a lot of people wouldn't have expected that, but it's that has actually been the case.
Talk to me for a moment about the differences, if you see any difference between a female career path and male career path. Are they significantly different or not really?
I'll talk about it personally and then talk about it generally. But effectively, what's happened with my career path is that when I went part-time, my career effectively did go sideways for probably 10 or more years. And I had 3 children, and was very happy with those kind of trade-offs, if you like, coming back to my strategy background. But then, I effectively, as the children got a bit older, kind of went back onto the career sort of trajectory. But the question of whether that's a male or a female path, if I think about the ideal model, it's the same for both men and women, and we should, to the extent possible, play an equal role in childcare. And, to me, the most ideal model would actually be if we both work part-time or flexibly. And, let's just say the equivalent of about 4 days a week. If you work 4 days a week, then it means that your children are only in 3 days of care, which I think is important. That means that they get more parent care a week, being 4 days, than they are in somebody else's care. I think in 4 days you can generally do a job. You might not be able to do enough of a job to get promoted, but I think you can generally do a job. I think that, if I fast forward a couple of decades, I'd love to see it where the male and female career paths aren't different, but that we're also comfortable putting our careers on hold so that we can dedicate time to, spending time with children.
We're almost at the end, but I do have a different section from your book that caught my attention. That's where you talk about the chapter about embrace change, and you talk about perfectionism. So you say, give up on perfectionism, which is a very important message for all of us. Talk to me for a moment about that, Nicolette.
Yeah, I think that's been a realization for me, and I think a lot of women, that part of our career success has come off the back of perfectionism, but it's not a quality that's conducive to work-life balance or any kind of inner peace either, I think, by the way. And how does that manifest itself in as a career mum? I'll just give you some examples, but, for me, one of the big issues was when I was doing that 7 a.m. till 1 o'clock, and I might be, putting together a presentation or a paper, and I would have to leave that in somebody else's hands at 1 o'clock to finish off. And, that would kill me, because if there were any typos or, even formatting errors, it used to kind of just get under my skin. And then, so that's sort of an example in the workplace, but an example at home as well is, as soon as you have children, having any kind of home that is neat and tidy, and, people can arrive at any time and it looks spotless, that's all got to go out the window as well. So, perfection is very much the enemy of work-life balance and inner peace, I think. And, I think it's really good for women to recognize if they are perfectionists and recognize that they might have to work on that a bit.
The question I have for you too, how do we learn to become less of a perfectionist. Would you say meditation or therapy even?
I think meditation is the answer to everything. So I think yes. I think, what is that saying? Perfectionism is the enemy of, I can't even remember what the saying is, but I think you've just got to realize that 90% is good enough and just get on with it. And, when I think about life as a career mum, there's just all these balls in the air, and you've just got to realize that, dropping some of them at times is okay and life goes on. So, how do you learn it? I hate to say it, but I think you learn it through the school of hard knocks more than anything else. And just stuffing up and realizing that life goes on and it's okay.
How do you define success these days? What is to be successful to you?
Yeah, success to me, funnily enough, is where we started, is that feeling of inner peace. I do think about my purpose and this feminine strength and kindness. And to the extent that I'm sort of living and achieving that, that's success for me. But, I come back to it. It's a feeling. Success is this feeling of inner peace and contentment.
I did want to ask you another question too before, but I guess I'll ask now. Do you believe in unconditional self-love?
Gosh, do I believe in it? I absolutely believe in it. Am I very good at implementing it? Probably not so good.
Tell me about it.
I'm very happy at preaching it, but I've got better at it over the years, and I'm a big believer in self-care, and that our children will be happiest when we are happy in ourselves. I really believe that, and that does mean, dedicating time to yourself and not feeling guilty about it.
Yeah. Why do we feel guilty doing the things that we must do in a way? What does it come from, this shame and guilt? What would you say?
I do think it is upbringing, and I think it's cultural.
Right.
And, there's a great TED talk again about Rashmi. She talks about how we teach our girls to be perfectionists and not brave. And I think it comes from, girls often are raised, and I see myself even doing it with my own girls. So this is not about somebody else doing the wrong thing, but, we teach them to, very specific behaviors from an early age. And, how does that play out? It means that when they get to the stage of, working career and having their own children, we still have this belief that our job is cleaning, our job is raising children, our job is cooking. And then on top of all of that, we add, and you're supposed to, because it's the new age, also have a, high-performing career on top of all of that, and we believe that we're supposed to do everything, and then you feel guilty when you're not doing components of it.
Right. That's wonderful to know that you are aware of this from experience and not passing this on to your children, which might be a challenge. It's a challenge, right, Nicolette? To let go of telling kids what to do and how to do, how to live their lives.
Yeah. I think, and I feel like I catch myself all the time making these mistakes with my own children as well. It's so ingrained in us. It's hard. Hopefully I do catch myself, but, if you ask my kids, I'll give you a very honest answer about all of the ways that that our expectations just translate onto them subconsciously.
I don't believe we can love others if we don't love ourselves. So it always starts here.
Yes, I fundamentally believe that too, but I think that act of doing it is challenging. Yeah.
So 3 more questions for you. What was the hardest lesson to learn about yourself in life as of today?
I think the thing that I've wrestled with the most is confidence, actually. And, if I ask myself, what would I tell my, 17-year-old self? It would be that, you're great and you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I had that self-doubt, inner critic. It's been a constant companion my whole life. And I've now read a lot about confidence, and women particularly in confidence. And it's quite a interesting and profound thing that we don't realize, that, men are naturally more confident in a lot of cases. There's a great book about this actually called The Confidence Code. And, one of the reasons for it is just testosterone, that men have, more testosterone than women, and that often gives them more confidence. And the other interesting thing is that it changes with age, that when we're young, men are more confident than women, but by your 40s, it starts to even out. In 50s and 60s, women actually become slightly more confident than men. So it's a fascinating phenomenon that I feel like we should be told or taught about much earlier. And I look back to the specific instances in my life of lacking confidence. And the ones that stand out, one of them was going from school to university. And I'd done quite well academically at school, but I still thought I was an absolute fraud and that I would get discovered at university, when you really had to think. And I just remember that real, that self-doubt at the time. And interestingly, the other times that I really lacked confidence were on my maternity leaves. And, it just goes through your mind about, do they want me back? Do they need me back? Is somebody doing a better job than I was doing? And you would think in my case, having had 3 maternity leaves, that I'd gone back successfully twice, that by the third, I wouldn't feel like that. But I absolutely did. It was still a recurring theme. So, that's probably, when I think about learnings, that appreciation of confidence, and, it comes back to, in some ways, to what you were saying about unconditional love, because it's, to the extent that you're lacking confidence, I'm not sure how much you can unconditionally love yourself either.
2 more questions for you, Nicolette. If you knew you would die soon, meaning losing the body, would you make any change in your life or do anything differently?
No. One of my passions is around retirement, aging, and longevity, coming from my actuarial background a bit. So I'm aiming to live beyond 100, and I really hope I can do that. But at the same time, if I died tomorrow, I would be quite happy. I've had a absolutely cherished life. So no, I wouldn't do anything differently.
What are 3 things about life you know for sure as of now?
The only thing I know for sure is that we don't know everything and we don't understand everything.
So true.
That's probably the one thing. The second thing, I think, kindness is everything. And I think it's the most important thing in life. And thirdly, I think that if we strive for inner peace, then that is, a great goal and aim in life.
Thank you so much for your wisdom, your genuine presence, your message, your mission. Thank you, Nicolette. Where can we find more information about you, your books, products, services, and future projects?
You can go to my website, nicoletterubinsztein.com.
Thank you so much again, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Valeria. Amazing questions, so quite incredible.
Yeah, I love your wisdom too. Bye for now, Nicolette.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Nicolette Rubinstein and her work, please visit nicoletterubinstein.com.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.